The more I read about this game, the more intrigued I become. Today, I'd like to keep my focus on the Eldfall Chronicles series, and specifically take a deep dive about the magic in the Eldfall Chronicles setting. I prefer fantasy over the sci-fi setting. One of the reasons is I like magics. From an adventure board gamer's perspective, the amount of detail Eldfall Chronicles have put into magic system may be unlike anything else you've seen before, and perhaps one we've dreamed of. The detail here is compatible to well-built, crafted tabletop RPG, fantasy story, movie, or perhaps anime. The purpose of this video is not to talk about specific game rule for spellcasting. It is to assess how much of the depth Eldfall Chronicles decided to commit in designing magic system. Let's take a look. In Eldfall Chronicles, magic is called Arcana. There's a very detailed world setting about this that you can and you should read on the official website, which I will put links below. In a fantasy-based adventure board game, it is not uncommon to see you have a magic and spellcasters. However, it is most likely for the purpose of keeping the game rules simple. Many games do not distinguish elements or types of magics. On the contrary, if you read fantasy novel, watch anime, or play RPG video games, it is one of the core elements of the world building to have different types of magic. In the Eldfall Chronicles, there are 4 principal elements: fire, air, water, and earth. Beyond the 4 nature-based elemental types of magic, the game has 3 more elements. 2 are called divine and profane. Yes, these 2 covers the classic light and dark opposing magic types. Then, the last one is called elder. This is element often referred to as lost magic, ancient magic, category in the other well-crafted fantasy settings. Eldfall Chronicles often have actual gameplay implementation of the detailed lores. The spells in this game indeed have elemental types. Currently, the game has an unequal number of representation from each element, but each element has at least 1 representation. The elemental classification system is thematic, with each element designed to have their own flavor. For example, fire spells are primarily focusing on damage with burn traits, which causes additional wounds from a given attack. Water spells can attempt to control the field to your advantage, such as by slowing enemies' movement. In Eldfall, there are affinity to elements, so most spellcasters, called arcanists in this game, can only cast particular element of spells that they have affinity to. This part of the lore serves a great reinforcement, so each element of the arcana will retain their own flavor as individual characters most likely to be able to cast a spell from the very specific type of element, which in turn makes characters feel unique in their playstyle. Furthermore, such setting and restriction allows to create the exciting character or moment in the future when there is a particular character who can cast spells from multiple different elements. We've all seen and know how cinematic this can be from our own favorite book, anime, or RPG. Just to illustrate another layer of depth the background story has, elves equivalent in Eldfall are called Rin. Most Rin are born with affinity to a single element, while humans do not have affinity to any arcana element when they were born. However, humans can learn new affinities through rigorous practice, while learning new affinities for Rin is nearly impossible. I appreciate such a detailed building of the world. Another example of the detailed world building is relationship among elements rather than just simple 7 independent classification system. Fire is fierce and swift. Air is swift and adaptable. Water is adaptable and resolute. Earth is resolute and fierce. For example, adjacent principal element arcana is easier for one to learn than the others. Affinity is fully translated and represented in the game as the core rule. In fact, most models look to have just one and some having 2 affinities so far. I also appreciate the game has added a layer of spell classification, which is serving as subcategorization. While Affinity defines fundamental type of spell that the model have potential access to, there is a concept of spellcraft, which defines a set of spells that the character have access to. This subclassification creates thematic sense of applied, derived, or specialized type of magics where perhaps nobody other than particular character has access to. As an example, while Anari has dual affinity to opposing principal element, water and fire, she uses cryomancy, the ice magic. This added layer of spell classification system allows creation of intentional design space for spell pool isolation. This is identical to what some of TCG does when the game was built from ground up with planned new expansion several times a year without plan for any set rotation. These games are often considered more serious organized play in mind, as there are often involvement of large cash prizes. In Eldfall, it's not just the elements that are used to classify the spells. There are spell types. The game defines 5 types of spells based on their application: sorcery, healing, enchantment, transmutation, and conjuration. In brief, sorcery can be seen as an instant, short-lasting spell. In gameplay perspective, they last until the duration of the activation sequence, which means essentially just one movement plus action set of a given model. A paradigmatic spell, Fireball, is a good example. Healing spells are self-explanatory. One thing to note here is that they are not just healing health point. Enchantment is also relatively self-explanatory. This type of spells have lasting effect beyond a single activation sequence. The default duration here is until the caster's next strategic phase, which means a whole round including remaining allies' activations and subsequent all opponents' character activations. The fourth type is transmutation. This type of spell has permanent effect until it is specifically removed or destroyed. There is no actual spell under this specific type at this moment. Perhaps some may consider as most thematic or cinematic spell type is conjuration. As I exactly imagine here, summoning a creature requires concentrated spell casting. This is represented by ritual action, which means the caster must forfeit its movement during the activation sequence. The summoned creature is treated as its own model, including own model profile. The summoner needs to pay mana upkeep cost at every active turn of its own. The cost of mana upkeep is defined by tier of the creature, and the limit is defined by summoner's stamina stat. I see this as very thematic mechanics. Each spell types have their unique thematic rule. For example, healing, enchantment, and conjuration types cannot be casted as a reaction. Transmutation spell may have an armor value, which allow it to become target of attack. Some spells require the model to pay mana cost. This is not the same as mana upkeep. In fact, the game actually have real mana represented as mana counter token. Currently, the only way to generate mana is to be a mage class and use its class ability, which allows conversion of any number of its activation points into corresponding amount of mana counters when it's in active role. Then the mana counter can be carried over to subsequent turns. Basically, this is a form of resource management. This part of game mechanics shows a potential of trading card games' fundamental game design, the mana resource management. Currently, there is Summoner class ability that allows sharing of a mana pool with other Summoner class members in the party. There are many more other details about magic in the Eldfall. From the lower side, I thought the Soul Rot concept is pretty cool. Soul Rot is essentially a condition where the model uses too much mana beyond what it is capable of. In video game, it's the condition where you run out of your magic point. This phenomenon has a very cinematic description in Eldfall Chronicles lore. When the individual threshold is reached, then an expelled mana starts to pull inside of the body, materializing and crystallizing within. The veins become overflown by tar-like substance, the crystallized mana, black and congealed. It spreads through the affected body, leading to paralysis. In severe cases, soul rot punctures the skin and leaves the victims perforated with profane protrusions that seems like blackened glass or broken shards. Although in concordance with majority of belief, spellcasters are usually glass cannon. This is true in Eldfall Chronicles, with spells generally tend to deal more damage than physical weapons, but the casters are more fragile. Also, developer notes spells usually have a shorter range than the physical ranged weapon. Although everything sounds great and I am hyped, I am greedy. There are a couple future wish lists from me. First, I would like to see each spells represented in their card with a high quality art. Being able to present a card on the battlefield when casting a spell gives me the physical feedback and improves game immersion. Second, there is currently only a single type of mana counter to represent mana accumulation. The lore and development confirms that there are 7 types of mana in the world of Eldfall Chronicles. So, as the game continues to expand, I hope to see individual mana types actually represented of its own as different types of tokens, dice, cards, or perhaps a combination of them. It will certainly improve immersion to the game, but also I'm hoping such implementation is a confirmation and necessity for the game stepping up to the next level of spellcasting. At that time, I am looking for replication, perhaps evolution of trading card games' resource management system. Doesn't it sound exciting to have a spell that requires 2 fire and 2 water mana? How is one going to pull that? Maybe 2 summoners, with each having different affinity, can share their mana together. What if a combat is taking a place in the field where a specific mana element is scarce and only so much can be stored in a mana pool at once between 2 players? While Eldfall Chronicle isn't just an adventure board game, with the Northern Wind, I think it's fair to view this as a fully fledged adventure board game, in addition to war skirmish game. So from the adventure board gamer's perspective, this game has unbelievable amount of lore and world building. The amount of detail here is something I've only seen in board game representation of the already pre-existed blockbuster game, movie, fantasy book, or anime. Here, Eldfall Chronicles is its own original IP And despite Dungeon Crawler system is being released after original wargame version, I think two are completely cross-compatible and continue to see future expansions together. So it's just impressive. Today, I've just done a quick research about their magic system implementation, but it was truly a joy to read the lores, setting, and then, most importantly, seeing those are directly represented in the actual gameplay mechanics. This is just a one piece and one example of the game's depth. Obviously, you don't need to know all the lores to play a game, but if you are after cinematic gameplay, Eldfall may be able to immerse you into the game fairly deeply. Thanks for watching.